Generally, there's areas where companies are pretty mature, have a lot of internal capabilities, or spend a lot of time and attention on something. But that almost always comes at a cost of not having gotten to other areas. It's just a matter of time in the day and resources that they have. So there's almost always areas where there can be some small optimizations to drive a lot more value. And then there's areas that typically need some sort of transformation.
Hey everybody, and welcome to the Incident Report presented by Quest Technology Management. I'm Paul Burke, Director of Technology Communications. Every week, I'm joined by VP of Sales and Partnerships, Adam Burke. The Incident Report brings you conversations with thought leaders, business innovators, and channel mavericks to help you stay productive and agile in a changing technology landscape. And quick reminder, we will be at the Channel Partner Conference and Expo May 1st through the 4th in Las Vegas. Say hello to myself, say hello to Adam, the rest of the Quest team. You can find us at booth 1902 at the Channel Partner Expo and Conference, May 1st through the 4th. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Incident Report. This is episode 55. I'm one of your podcast hosts. One of your pod just sounds weird. The other podcast host, the man across from me, Adam Burke. How are you doing today?
Doing well, Paul. Excited to be here. Trying to keep my awkward intros down to a minimum for today, but you seem to cover that in spades launching this off, so I appreciate it. Yeah, good job.
A little awkward intro. Still learning, 55 episodes in, still learning how to walk and do this podcast. One thing people love in a podcast is guests. Adam, we got a big get today. Kyle Hall, President of Resourcive. Resourcive is a value-added sourcing consultancy focused on delivering strategic IT sourcing solutions to the mid-market and enterprise-level business. As president, Kyle ensures alignment of client vision throughout relationships, beginning with initial scoping calls and continuing throughout the full life cycle through management of implementation and account teams. Prior to joining Resourcive, Kyle served in the U.S. Army Special Forces as a Green Beret. Kyle, thank you very much for your service, and thank you for joining the Incident Report.
Thanks, Paul. Happy to join you guys.
Kyle, we have so many questions. We could begin so many different places, but I would love to know, how do you go from Green Beret to the channel? I would love to hear your story.
Yeah, it was quite a leap. And I'll say, when I was first transitioning out of the military, I didn't even know, that kind of our niche of the industry existed. All right. This whole indirect channel that we exist and fortunately thrive in. I had no idea it even existed, but I was going through a transition program basically called the Honor Foundation at the time. And so it's a nonprofit focused on helping generally like special operations and fighter pilots transition. So, SEALs, Rangers, Green Berets, as well as fighter pilots, transition into the private sector. And through that, I met a guy named John Allen, who was actually going through with me. He's got a content deal with Amazon and does a bunch of other stuff now. But at the time, he had this idea of basically taking 20 transitioning special operations members, throwing them in a room up in New York he had a buddy that was in investment banking, but basically a bunch of finance executives. And the owner of Resourcive, Tom Geske, was in that room. I was as well. We met each other, and really, really went from there. I started in the channel as a project manager. After about 6 months, I moved into a director of operations role, and then have grown into my current role.
And you've been with them for 6 years, is that correct?
Yeah, for 6 years, yep.
Also, I think it's important to mention for the audience, so everyone knows the quality of gent we're talking with. As I was doing my pre-show research, I learned you were recently named one of Channel Future's top executives of 2022. Congratulations. That's quite an accomplishment.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Insert applause. Yeah, Paul, you gotta get that.
Also, you're a co-host of your own podcast, The Wrap, Resourcive as a podcast.
Yeah. Yep. We chat with industry execs, but tend to focus more with like CIOs, CTOs. Our most recent person was a chief procurement officer. So kind of focused around sourcing of technology and how to drive value out of technology investments.
And I don't think I've ever mentioned this, but your podcast, Wrap, was one of the inspirations for the podcast right here, the Incident Report.
Before we press record, you did call me out a little bit that we've been inconsistent recently, and you're absolutely right. I think we got to pick it back up and get our consistency back up.
It's a great podcast. I always enjoy listening, and we'll definitely add a link in the description of this episode. And actually, Adam has been a guest on the wrap, and that was a really fun episode.
Our best.
Our best.
Fantastic. Thanks, guys. I appreciate that. And it was, we used to do a video thing back when COVID hit, and then we decided we wanted to do a little bit more consistent. And after I got to hop on there and chat with you guys, Paul was like, well, what if we just start doing audio and start pushing out a podcast? So just talking about the channel. So that's how it all started, which has been a lot of fun.
Kyle, what's one thing that somebody would be surprised to learn about you?
Random fact, I've traveled coast to coast on a motorcycle. I think that's probably pretty rare and something that I don't talk a lot about. Has nothing to do with our industry or what I do today. But
what kind of motorcycle?
It was a Kawasaki Concourse, so like a sport touring. I was young. I got it for like $2,500, I think.
You go 80 or did you go 10? Or did you go like back roads?
Yeah, no, I went a little bit all of it. Yeah, so definitely some back roads in there. Generally, though, it was a more southerly route. So I actually bought it in Louisiana, then traveled up to Maine, and then went back south, and then all the way out to Oregon. So,
Kyle, you have that classic look in a film as somebody is remembering an incredible time. It looks almost as if we're about to fade out to a memory, which makes me really curious. What is one of the best things that happened on the trip?
So I did it over about 2 months. I think the interesting part of it was, the thing that's immediately coming up for me was I got caught in a rainstorm at one point, and it was 70, 80 degrees outside, not that cold. But the thing that immediately sticks out for me is just how cold you can get when you are wet in 80-degree temperature, but going 80 miles an hour. I like almost got hypothermia on that, but it's a thing that immediately sticks out for me. Probably not the answer you were looking for, but
that's interesting. It's one of those things you never think about until you're on a motorcycle and you discover it and start freezing. So I am curious, and I just have to ask, and then we're going to get into Resourcive, and we're going to talk about the channel, and it's going to be very channel focused. But I would love to know what inspired this 2-month road trip.
I was 21. I'd done a handful of things. I've been like marginally successful at most stuff I'd put my hand towards. I was just kind of looking for what to do next. The thing that actually led to me becoming a Green Beret was on that trip. I started reading this book called Chosen Soldier, and it was really about it's basically an account of a guy going through the qualification course, so the Q course to become a Green Beret. And I was at that time in my life, I was just kind of in this exploratory phase about what I was going to do, that sort of thing, and read that book while I was doing it, and was just kind of left like, I didn't want to get old and wonder if I could have done it. Like it seemed like such this big challenge to do. And so, I was in this exploratory phase of my life, and that's really kind of what brought it to an end to some extent. When I got back out to Oregon where I was living at the time, I went and enlisted with, it's called an 18 X-ray contract, but essentially a contract that allowed me to come in, and it certainly did not by any means guarantee me a slot in special forces. But what it did guarantee is as long as I made it through the things leading up to it, I could go to selection and try to enter the qualification phase for special forces. And so I guess as much as anything, I was just kind of was looking for what I was going to do, with my life, really.
Thanks for sharing that, because I think we all have those moments we ask, am I going to look back and regret this? And you thought, well, I'm going to give it a shot and see how it goes. And it sounds like, it changed your life. So yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Could you tell us a little bit about Resourcive? I know that's a bit of a hard pivot from what we were just talking about, but I'd love to know more about what Resourcive does.
Yeah, all good. So Resourcive, at our core, we're a technology value creation partner. And so what that means is we are coming in and we are working typically with the CFO, CIO, sometimes within procurement, but oftentimes existing kind of in that, think of it almost like a triangle, right? Between the technology leadership, the finance leadership, and the procurement leadership within these organizations, going in and working with them to identify where there's opportunity to drive value out of the technology they already consume or the technology that's available to them in the marketplace. So working with them to identify that, quantify what that value is, so building business cases, and then ultimately implementing that technology that they see as valuable.
Kyle, I know we've worked together a few times, and always fun to see your guys' process as far as how you engage, with procurement and with IT decision makers and with the finance folks. How often in your model are you seeing organizations, getting the most out of their current technology stack versus needing to replace it? Like, is it a 50-50 environment where you guys get brought in you guys work with a lot of folks that are kind of evaluating financial models and trying to figure out how they can leverage and scale as much as possible. Are you seeing people, they have a lot of capabilities already in their environment? If they augment and upgrade a little bit, is it kind of a 50-50? Is it now you need to replace most everything that's involved there? Or is it kind of a little bit of everything there?
It's generally a mix, right? And it'll depend, even within a client, it will depend. They may be really great in one area, right? But what it took to get really great in that area often meant that they weren't paying attention in this other area, or they weren't able to devote the time or resources. I shouldn't say pay attention, but they weren't able to devote the time or resources to optimizing that area. There's almost always an opportunity for both optimization with what they have, right? So some small things with what they have, and then transformation. The way we kind of frame that and talk about it is often, very rarely do we see like a project that stands alone on its own. There's almost always supporting projects around it, even if it's just optimizing something over here to create space in the budget to invest in a different area of the business. I know the question was kind of at a client level, but usually what we see is it really, the way we talk about internally is technology pillars, but generally there's areas where companies are pretty mature, have a lot of internal capabilities, or spend a lot of time and attention on something, but that almost always comes at a cost of not having gotten to other areas. On the whole, the clients that we work with are generally trying to forward what they're doing with their technology investments, right? They're generally not apathetic, right? I mean, they're trying to accomplish these things. It's just a matter of time in the day and resources that they have. So there's almost always areas where there can be some small optimizations to drive a lot more value. And then there's areas that typically need some sort of transformation.
You mentioned pillars. Like, where are you spending most of your time? Are you in the security landscape? Are you in the unified communications and collaboration? Where do you like to spend your day? Or is it across the board? You guys kind of assess the entire IT stack?
Yeah, so we do assess across the board. I'd just say a kind of a couple trends and kind of stuff we've been seeing lately. I guess historically, Resourcive, in the early 2000s, our background and pedigree came out of working with large multi-location retail. So doing a lot of network audits, a lot of voice type projects. And we still do a lot of that. But again, like a lot of times that's a supporting effort for us now. It's something where we can go and we can create space in the budget by optimizing or running an RFP, or maybe even we're still doing voice transformations, right? Moving things from on-prem to the cloud. But I think the conversations that we're having now that are much more exciting and generally more forwarding for the business, certainly security is one area that we acquired a cybersecurity practice last year, actually run by another Green Beret. So we have a former Green Beret who's running that practice as our cyber practice lead, having a lot of conversations there. And that's everything from tool sets to outsource managed services. It's really looking at it holistically. We use the cyber defense matrix to basically stack up what companies are doing and try to optimize budget for their investments, are addressing things like tool sprawl, resource deficiencies, that sort of stuff. So we're having a lot of conversations there. And then also a lot around the way we talk about it internally is we say cloud compute, but I really think of it like cloud/compute, right? Like I'm not aligned to AWS or Azure or co-location. Like we want to talk holistically about what is the right environment for each workload. What we see a lot of now with our clients is the industry has talked about it like multi-cloud, but we see it as like multi-environment, right? You've got some things that may be still on your own premises or in a co-location, some things that are going to be infrastructure as a service, and some things in the hyperscalers, but making all those work together with a cost optimized model for each workload is where we're seeing a lot of work now. The other one I would say, we're doing a lot of contact center work too, for obvious reasons. That's been a big growth area over the last 3 years for us.
Right. Paul and I mentioned, last week we were talking about some of the surprises in the hyperscale world and the AWS revenue, and they kind of missed on the margins. They were expecting about 30% growth, and now they're projecting around 22% growth. And that was definitely a surprise for us, at least in the market. It was a surprise. And Quest, we've seen people kind of dial back some of their jumping with both feet into the hyperscaler world. Anything surprised you in the last 12 to 18 months that you've seen from a trend standpoint? For folks out there who are, involved in our business, anything come as a surprise to you as a trend, or like, I didn't see that one coming, or anything like that?
2 or 3 years ago, especially when AWS was really hitting, people thought it was going to be, at least in my sense, people thought it was going to really impact the colo market. But from what I can tell, colo is still on fire. Challenged to get space in some of the top tier markets. We see a lot of clients that are still like looking to that as a solution to move stuff off premise or to repatriate. I think there's a lot of repatriating happening right now. I think Basecamp specifically, their CTO is like very publicly repatriating from AWS right now. I mean, he's posting pictures of, his shipments of hardware and stuff, talking about it. So it's kind of interesting.
And from repatriation standpoint, you mean for the uninitiated, moving from the hyperscaler environment to a private cloud, traditional colo type. Hey, I got hardware and spinning disk and my own power management and everything like that. Yeah. That is a trend we're seeing as well. It's not talked about too much, but yeah, you said that was Basecamp.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, I'll send it to you guys after this, but it's somewhere on LinkedIn. I mean, I've been following him as he he posted about doing it. I mean, a week later, he has a pallet of hardware that he's talking about how excited he is to get it spun up.
Nice. And not to detract from the technology conversation we're having here, but when can Green Berets and Army get the same publicists as the Navy SEALs? Because you know what, I really appreciate all of the publicity that the SEALs are getting these days. Well, Crenshaw and Goggins' little roast right now is probably a little bit fun for those outside of that community. But when can the Green Berets? We publish any books? I mean, you got Tim Kennedy, so you got that. You got Kennedy. Oh, and you got Max or Matt too on thank you for your service. So that's good. But I think we got to up the game there.
We've really undersold ourselves. I mean, one of the things and look, it takes a while, like when you're transitioning out. I mean, look, I don't talk about being a Green Beret, much or that often. When you're in, one of the names or monikers for Green Berets is quiet professionals, and you kind of, you embody that when you're in service. You don't talk a lot about, what you do or any of that stuff. We definitely undersell ourselves for sure.
Yeah. I appreciate everything you guys done. And I know a lot of the members on your team, you guys have a special organization there from a prior services standpoint. I know like Adrian, who's came on board from your cyber practice, he was part of the community as well. And I think you guys have some MARSOC dudes on the team as well as some other folks on the team. So it's a special breed. I think we talked about it. I know Kyle, one of the first times we met, around commander's intent and the ability to have your people execute within kind of left and right limit. But your organization is full of, what people in the community would consider force multipliers, right? Could you kind of share with the audience, like the idea of, what a force multiplier is? And I think that is really one of Resourcive's kind of hidden talents is being that force multiplier for organizations you get involved in, because that's a pretty special skill set a lot of you guys bring to the table there.
The concept comes from, so I mean, that's a term that they use for Green Berets, and I'll talk about it in that context, and I'll bring it to what we do in Resourcive. But I mean, the concept even of, so the term A team, right, that comes from ODA, so Operational Detachment Alpha, which is what they call a 12-person unit of Green Berets. And the concept behind them and the way the force is structured is you can take a team and put them in another country, and they operate, the phrase is by, with, and through partner forces. So whether that's host nation forces, or, I mean, for instance, when I went to Afghanistan, I had what was called an Afghan SOC, so a Special Operations Kandak. It's a battalion of roughly 1,000 Afghan soldiers. And our job was to work by, with, and through them. So there's 12 of us. We go in and we work with this 1,000-person unit to really make sure we're aligning what they're doing with Uncle Sam's strategic objectives. And the way that looks at Resourcive is very similarly, Resourcive doesn't have a widget that we're selling, right? We don't have a technology product. Fundamentally, we're an advisor. We're going in and working with our clients to understand their strategic objectives, what they're trying to accomplish, and then working by, with, and through providers in the market to see that come to fruition. So, a lot of what we have to do is, one, be very, very clear on what our clients are trying to accomplish, right? Understand the mission set. That would have been how we would have done it before, right? Like, what are we actually trying to accomplish in this region or in this country? So for our clients, what are they trying to accomplish with the technology that they're doing? What are they building for scale? Are they optimizing for margin? What is it that they're doing at its most basic strategic level? and then understand the operational environment. So what do they have today? What does the tech stack look like? What are their staff's capabilities? What's the roadmap and where they're going? What's their capacity for change? All of those types of things. And then we have to go be able to navigate the market and all the providers that are out there and bring those capacities back into our clients, but manage it for execution. So there's actually a surprising amount of overlap between kind of some of the soft skills that I developed as a Green Beret and what we do at Resourcive now, because we're always working in this kind of by, with, and through capacity, right? I mean, we're trying to understand what our clients really want and then manage vendors to perform.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, I definitely see the coordination it takes in order to understand the environment you're in and then use the tool sets that you have available as well as the resources that you could have available to make the most out of, what your clients are trying to achieve. So that's really cool. I've noticed that in working with your team. That's definitely something that is a value that's within the Resourcive organization that comes through in spades when people get involved with you guys. So it's really cool.
I know a lot of y'all's listeners are in this corner of our industry around indirect channel and that sort of stuff. I mean, I would love to see more Green Berets in this. Look, I mean, I think the challenge with bringing talent into our industry is most people don't know it exists, right? Mm-hmm. If you're not from this, I mean, we're all, I think, in an echo chamber here, right? We see each other at the same conferences. We run in a lot of these same circles, but outside of this, it's not something that especially most transitioning veterans know about. It's something where they do bring a lot of soft skills around partnership, coordination with adjacent units, like all of those types of things that are these soft skills that you develop in service that are impactful and have a place in our industry.
I think it'd be a great thing to kind of evangelize in that community, as well as, for anyone out there looking for, I think some organizations did a podcast on this, but SkillBridge is a great transitioning opportunity for folks who are coming off active duty and they can get trained up in the IT world as well as the IT sales or IT consulting. But we'll put a link in here and we'll grab that Honor Foundation link too from you, Kyle, and put it in there for a listening team. Those transitioning services for folks coming off active duty and out of special operations communities. Like when I talk to my wife or friends or anyone like that, like, yeah, you're in IT sales and channel sales. Not a lot of people know what that actually means.
Yeah, no, outside of this, I don't think it's general knowledge.
Since you are so familiar with the channel, is there anything coming down the road that you're excited about?
I'm closely watching kind of the general SaaS go-to-market, right? I mean, I think a lot of our go-to-market in the indirect channel, kind of in the trusted advisor movement, right? A lot of that comes out of telecom historically, and we certainly still do a lot of business there. I'm really closely watching what happens in the SaaS space, which I think traditionally their partner approach has been more on the kind of SI, right? They've looked for people that they weren't looking for partners that could drive value in the sales channel quite as much as they were, at least at a deep level, right? They may have looked transactionally, but at a deep level, they were more looking at companies that could drive value out of getting it integrated, get it adopted, doing that type of stuff. I'm continuing to watch kind of what happens there. I mean, I think we're seeing a lot of it and getting a lot of exposure to it right now, within cyber. I'm very, very focused on kind of cyber go-to-market. Most of what we do today is around managed services for cyber, much more so than it is like the tool set necessarily, right? I think a lot of the cyber tools, they'll go to market maybe through distributors, but not as much through like advisors, like the space we occupy. So I'm continuing to watch probably the closest the cyber channel and what happens there. I think we're a little ahead right now. We're in a lot of conversations where we can advise on it, we can make an impact for our clients, but we don't necessarily have channel for procurement for our clients. So I'm watching that mature. I think as that market consolidates some, that helps it too.
That's interesting. So from what you've seen from the SaaS perspective, those organizations typically are partnering with, what could be considered a delivery partner and an integration partner, as opposed to a door opener to get you like an influence operator. Okay.
Yeah. That's what it seems like to me, at least. I mean, like a Snowflake, for instance, or like those types of companies. They're much more focused on kind of the service delivery side than they are on the sales side from a partnership perspective.
Do you think that has to do kind of with the complex nature of those solutions?
I think that's part of it.
Getting tied in.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I think also, any of these companies that are pursuing like a PLG strategy, right, a product-led growth, they're going to focus much more on adoption and driving value out of the tool, probably rightfully so. Like, I mean, I like it as a go-to-market strategy than they are on the traditional sales side. That's one man's perspective. I mean, what do you see, Adam? I'm curious. What do you guys see?
It's a good point. There's been a lot of consolidation in the channel and the TSP market and kind of, where that's all going. And you have the traditional distributors and you have the distributors that we work with. You have the TD Senexes and the Arrows and the Avants, Telarises and Telesys. All those players are all kind of moving similar directions. I'm curious, and Paul and I have talked about this before. Some of them are starting to acquire integration groups. Some of them are starting to bolt in, delivery capabilities. Whereas historically it's been more of a pass-through referral arrangement type of a setup, as opposed to now there's some people that are acquiring talent for actual integration work. And I think that's just the natural next step. And you guys are in the middle market. You guys work with private equity firms. Those people in that world, that's a business unto it of itself, right? There's a clock that starts when you're dealing with other people's money and people want to return. So, I think as they assess the market and figure out their business models, I think people are starting to figure out that there's additional revenue opportunities in services and in integration work and in getting involved in the deliverable itself. So I got my antennas up and my radar is kind of out there looking for who's making those acquisitions and who's making those partnerships and those arrangements. Whether it's traditional TSPs or who.
You got to find that intersection of what's of value to the client and what's of value to the provider. That's what we're looking at all the time, right? And so when you really break it down, it comes down to two things. You can either bring them new clients or you can get their services implemented and drive adoption, right? I mean, at its most basic. And then on the client side, like, I mean, if you can bring them technology that actually produces value in their business, that's valuable to them. If you can get technology that they've already identified, it's valuable to them. So either one of those places is a place that you can be. I think probably you got a little bit better moat as a business on the service delivery side, probably a little bit easier to recreate if you really have exceptional delivery capabilities, probably a little bit harder to recreate that than it is to recreate, exceptional sales capabilities. I don't know. I'm sure there'd be a debate about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kyle, thanks again for joining us today. And I wanted to ask you a question that you asked Adam on your podcast. And I'm curious, what technology can you not live without? Adam mentioned, I'm going to spoil the end of the episode. Adam mentioned that he cannot live without his Garmin. What piece of tech can you not live without?
No, I love the Garmin watch too, mostly as an aside, and I'll come back to it, but mostly because I've been trying to get back into running. And I can put a plan in this thing and walk out the door and hit a button and I don't have to think about anything. It tells me what I'm running, right? It gives me the whole plan, which is really nice because otherwise you're like, I don't know what I'm going to do today. Maybe I just won't run, right? And then next thing you know, you haven't run. As far as one piece of tech, I mean, it's probably like I really struggle when I'm out of my physical office and I have my whole workstation here. I mean, I've got 3 screens and like, I don't like typing on a laptop. I've got my full stuff here. I really struggle outside of like my at-home workstation, just because I've got everything set up exactly how I want it. I've got my internal team chat, my email, like everything in here.
I will 100% echo. Typing on a laptop is the worst.
Yeah. I struggle if I'm on one screen and only on a laptop. I need the command center,
Need the old technical operations center going on there. You got the whole time rolled out.
Exactly. Yeah.
Nice.
Kyle, thanks for joining us, sharing your story, where you think the channel is headed. We really appreciate your insight and everything we talked about. All the links can be found in the description. We hope you have an amazing week.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Kyle.
Hi, this is Future Paul. As I was editing this podcast, I realized we never mentioned some important information. Resourcive is growing and looking to expand their talented team, actively recruiting senior consulting and sales talent. If you're interested, please reach out to Kyle through www.resourcive.com. Thanks so much for listening. The Incident Report is brought to you by Quest Technology Management. With over 40 years of experience, Quest is a leading technology integrator working seamlessly with your staff and systems to achieve your IT goals. Learn more about everything they do at questsys.com. And if you have questions or suggestions for the podcast, you can always email Adam and myself at theincidentreport@questsys.com. We hope you have a great week, and we'll see you next time.